We are continuing with this long chapter. Here we start to get into some heavy philosophical stuff.
8. When the water hath planks, when gangways and railings o'erspan the stream, verily he is not believed who then saith, all is in flux. But even the simpletons contradict him. What, say the simpletons, all in flux? Planks and railings are still over the stream. Over the stream all is stable, all the values of things, the bridges and bearings, all good and evil, these are all stable.
We go straight into one of the oldest debates in philosophy, the debate between the philosophy of being and the philosophy of becoming. Zarathustra is a philosopher of becoming, but he knows that his view is not a popular one. He claims that everything is in flux, that reality is an ever-changing stream where nothing is stable. But the philosophers of being, and even the laymen, point to things that seem to be built over the stream, and remain stable. Especially the values of good and evil, those seem to be stable and eternal.
Cometh, however, the hard winter, the stream tamer, then learn even the wittiest distrust, and verily not only the simpletons then say, should not everything stand still? Fundamentally standeth everything still. That is an appropriate winter doctrine, good cheer for an unproductive period, a great comfort for winter sleepers and fireside loungers.
During winter, the water freezes, and then it seems that everything stands still. Metaphorically, this symbolizes a time when the spirit of man has decayed, and he no longer creates new things. Zarathustra feels that we are marching towards such a time, if things continue the way they are.
Fundamentally standeth everything still, but contrary thereto preacheth the thawing wind. The thawing wind, a bullock, which is no ploughing bullock, a furious bullock, a destroyer, which with angry horns breaketh the ice. The ice, however, breaketh gangways.
But when the ice takes over and freezes everything, eventually it causes things to break, and then people will see that all those things that they thought were stable are actually just constructs built over the stream. The thawing wind, his philosophy of becoming, could then take over and melt the ice to revive the spirit.
O my brethren, is not everything at present in flux? Have not all railings and gangways fallen into the water? Who would still hold on to good and evil? Woe to us, hail to us, the thawing wind bloweth. Thus preach my brethren through all the streets.
It is already happening. The old values are collapsing. Nietzsche wrote a lot about the breakdown of values in contemporary Europe, which led to the rise of nihilism. Zarathustra's thawing wind, however, is not nihilistic. It wants to destroy the old values to create new ones that don't pretend to be eternal and universal, but take into account the realization that everything is in flux.
9. There is an old illusion. It is called good and evil. Around soothsayers and astrologers hath hitherto revolved the orbit of this illusion. Once did one believe in soothsayers and astrologers, and therefore did one believe, everything is fate, thou shalt, for thou must. Then again did one distrust all soothsayers and astrologers, and therefore did one believe, everything is freedom, thou canst, for thou willest. O my brethren, concerning the stars and the future there hath hitherto been only illusion, and not knowledge. And therefore, concerning good and evil there hath hitherto been only illusion, and not knowledge.
Good and evil, that is, the concept of eternal and universal good and eternal and universal bad, which are external to humans, are believed in since the time when people believed in soothsayers and astrologers. In those ancient times, they also believed that their fate is external to them, and they can do nothing to change it. Then, they lost their faith in soothsayers and astrologers, and started to believe that we have free will, and that our fate is determined by our actions, something we create for ourselves. But they did not make the necessary adjustment in the field of ethics. instead of realizing that this means that good and bad are also things that we should create for ourselves, they continue to believe in external good and evil. Zarathustra tries to make us realize that good and evil are an illusion, nothing but a plank constructed over the stream of becoming, a relic of ancient thinking that we should overcome.
10. Thou shalt not rob, thou shalt not slay. Such precepts were once called holy. Before them did one bow the knee and the head, and take off one's shoes. But I ask you, where have there ever been better robbers and slayers in the world than such holy precepts? Is there not, even in all life, robbing and slaying? And for such precepts to be called holy, was not truth itself thereby slain? Or was it a sermon of death that called holy what contradicted and dissuaded from life? O my brethren, break up for me the old tables.
This is one of the places where Nietzsche goes all the way with his beyond good and evil stance. Even the commandments against murder and theft, he says, should not exist. His problem, it seems, is that murder and theft are both expressions of will to power, and the will to power should not be harnessed by external rules. He is obviously talking about murder and theft in a broader sense, like, for instance, killing some of your old ideas, and saying that these commandments are making the human spirit too weak to carry out those necessary forms of killing. Your morality should be based on your will to power, and you are the one who should find the reason why literal murder and theft are wrong. But this is not satisfactory. What if one comes to the conclusion that it is all right for them to murder and steal? Nietzsche doesn't have a sufficient answer for this question. It seems to me that what he is saying, although he never spells it out, is that when we become powerful, we would not mind murder and theft, even when they are committed against us. Yes, even being murdered is acceptable to the Nietzschean man, because he knows he will live again thanks to the eternal return. I don't find this answer to be satisfactory either. We shall discuss Nietzsche's morality in greater length when we get to the fourth part of the book.
11. It is my sympathy with all the past that I see it is abandoned. Abandoned to the favour, the spirit, and the madness of every generation that cometh, and reinterpreteth all that hath been as its bridge. A great potentate might arise, an artful prodigy, who with approval and disapproval could strain and constrain all the past, until it became for him a bridge, a harbinger, a herald, and a cock-crowing.
This is another problem with the philosophy of being. It presumes that its concepts are eternal, when actually, every generation interprets these concepts differently. But because of this belief, some tyrant might come along, who will allege to be representing eternal ideals, and will force these ideals on everyone.
This, however, is the other danger, and mine other sympathy. He who is of the populace, his thoughts go back to his grandfather. With his grandfather, however, doth time cease. Thus is all the past abandoned, for it might some day happen for the populace to become master, and drown all time in shallow waters.
And there is another danger. Since reality is actually becoming, ever-changing, the masses are slaves to whatever interpretation of the values prevail at the moment, unconsciously adopting them. Their memory and knowledge are too limited to realize just how temporary these interpretations are. Currently, there are still those who believe in so-called eternal values, and they serve as a counterbalance to the masses. But one day humanity might realize that there are no eternal values, and that other type of people will disappear, leaving only the masses. Then, all sense of history will be lost, and people will just be following the whims of the moment.
Therefore, O my brethren, a new nobility is needed, which shall be the adversary of all populace and potentate rule, and shall inscribe anew the word noble on new tables. For many noble ones are needed, and many kinds of noble ones, for a new nobility. Or, as I once said in a parable, that is just divinity, that there are gods, but no God.
Therefore, A new nobility is needed that will create values that are more sustainable. Not eternal values, since those don't exist, but values that are forged out of the will to power. They may not be eternal, but they will hold for longer, and will not bow to the whims of the masses. No less important, they will not be universal, but every nobleman will have their own values, creating a pluralism of tables, a pluralism that is needed to create a truly strong nobility. Zarathustra quotes what he said in the Apostates, when he told us that the idea of divinity died when it lost its pluralism, when humans stopped believing in many gods and instead started to believe in one God, until they couldn't believe in him either, and then there was no longer an alternative God to replace him. This new nobility that we shall create will replace the old divinity, replace the dead gods with strong humans who create their own values.
12. O my brethren, I consecrate you, and point you to a new nobility. Ye shall become procreators and cultivators and sowers of the future. Verily, not to a nobility which ye could purchase, like traders with traders' gold. For little worth is all that hath its price. Let it not be your honour henceforth, whence ye come, but whither ye go. Your will and your feet which seek to surpass you, let these be your new honour.
The old nobility was determined by where they came from. That is, the bloodlines that they were born into. The new nobility shall be determined by where they go. That is, if they are people who develop their spirit in the way that Zarathustra prescribed.
Verily, not that ye have served a prince, of what account are princes now, nor that ye have become a bulwark to that which standeth, that it may stand more firmly. Not that your family have become courtly at courts, and that ye have learned, gay-coloured like the flamingo, to stand long hours in shallow pools. For ability to stand is a merit in courtiers, and all courtiers believe that unto blessedness after death pertaineth permission to sit.
This describes and derides the old nobility, the courtly society of Europe. They were nothing but servants, says Zarathustra. This is not what the new nobility shall be.
Nor even that a spirit called holy led your forefathers into promised lands, which I do not praise. For where the worst of all trees grew, the cross, in that land there is nothing to praise. And verily, wherever this Holy Spirit led its knights, always in such campaigns did goats and geese, and rye-heads and guy-heads run foremost.
Along with serving the king, the old nobility also served the Christian religion, acting as its foot soldiers. This, too, is not what the new nobility shall be.
O my brethren, not backward shall your nobility gaze, but outward. Exiles shall ye be from all fatherlands and forefatherlands. Your children's land shall ye love. Let this love be your new nobility, the undiscovered in the remotest seas. For it do I bid your sails search and search. Unto your children shall ye make amends for being the children of your fathers. All the past shall ye thus redeem. This new table do I place over you.
The new noblemen are not those who remained faithful to their old aristocratic families, nor to old values, but rather those who break away from these old concepts and create a land of new values. They create a new society, a new humanity, one that is built on these values. This will redeem the past, as the past was needed to get us to that point. As we recall, redeeming the past is very important to Zarathustra, and we cannot have full redemption without it. Once we transform humanity by reinterpreting its history to redirect it towards the Superman, the past will be redeemed.
13. Why should one live? All is vain. To live, that is to thrash straw. To live, that is to burn oneself and yet not get warm. Such ancient babbling still passeth for wisdom. Because it is old, however, and smelleth mustily, therefore is it the more honoured. Even mould ennobleth. Children might thus speak, They shun the fire because it hath burnt them. There is much childishness in the old books of wisdom.
The idea that earthly life is vanity is an old idea, and can be found in the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes. Zarathustra says that this position is respected only because it is old, but it is actually an infantile position.
And he who ever thrasheth straw, why should he be allowed to rail at thrashing? Such a fool one would have to muzzle. Such persons sit down to the table and bring nothing with them, not even good hunger, and then do they rail, all is vain. But to eat and drink well, my brethren, is verily no vain art. Break up for me the tables of the never joyous ones.
Here he invokes another biblical passage. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. It was said first by the prophet Isaiah, who was commenting on how people behave on the eve of war, indulging in earthly pleasures instead of tending to their souls. It was repeated by St. Paul, who used it to describe a life of meaningless indulgence. But enjoying earthly pleasures, says Zarathustra, is not meaningless, if you know how to do it in the right way. The people who denigrate it simply have an ideology that makes them hate earthly life, so they never learned how to live it properly. We should ignore these joyless people, and break their tables.
14. To the clean are all things clean, thus say the people. I, however, say unto you, to the swine all things become swinish. Therefore preach the visionaries and bowed heads, whose hearts are also bowed down. The world itself is a filthy monster. For these are all unclean spirits, especially those, however, who have no peace or rest, unless they see the world from the backside, the backworld's men.
The common idiom is that, to the clean, all things are clean. But this idiom, says Zarathustra, emerges out of a worldview that regards earthly life as a filthy thing. Thus, you have to remain clean to distance yourself from it. But actually, earthly life is mostly a clean and beautiful thing, and it is those who distance themselves from it and present it as filthy who are making their spirit filthy in the process. And because they shaped our mind, we are trapped in their filth and perceive our world as filthy. In the end, it tells us who the worst of these swinish people are. They are the backworlds men, whom we discussed in part 1, those people who believe that our world is false and hides the real, ideal world.
To those do I say it to the face, although it sound unpleasantly. The world resembleth man in that it hath a backside. So much is true. There is in the world much filth. So much is true. But the world itself is not therefore a filthy monster.
Just like man has a part of the body, in his backside, where all the filth concentrates, so does the world have parts that contain filth. But the backworldsmen, because they see our world as false and cannot enjoy it, see only the filth. To say it differently, the backworldsmen have their head up their ass.
There is wisdom in the fact that much in the world smelleth badly. Loathing itself createth wings, and fountain divining powers. In the best there is still something to loathe, and the best is still something that must be surpassed. O my brethren, there is much wisdom in the fact that much filth is in the world.
The fact that this world contains bad and ugly things serves the backworldsmen against it. They say we should aspire to the world of truth, where everything is pure and good. But in a world where everything is good, there is nothing to overcome, nothing to surpass. And since the greatest joy, as we know, is experienced at a time of self-surpassing, it means that their ideal world will not provide us with the greatest joys. It is better to stay in our imperfect world, where you can fight, overcome, and fly to the highest tops.
15. Such sayings did I hear pious backworlds men speak to their consciences, and verily without wickedness or guile, although there is nothing more guileful in the world, or more wicked. Let the world be as it is, raise not a finger against it. Let whoever will choke and stab and skin and scrape the people, raise not a finger against it. Thereby will they learn to renounce the world. And thine own reason, this shalt thou thyself stifle and choke, for it is a reason of this world. Thereby wilt thou learn thyself to renounce the world. Shatter, shatter, O my brethren, those old tables of the pious. Tatter the maxims of the world maligners.
Some backwoodsmen live a life of abstinence, renouncing everything in this world. Zarathustra doesn't even bother telling us why that's bad. It should be obvious by now.